Hey guys, I love y'all so much and I hope that today's message encourages you. Be sure and like and subscribe if you are tuning in on YouTube. Comment down below what you learned in today's message and what other topics you'd like to hear talked about moving forward. And if you're tuning in via Apple or Spotify, be sure and download, rate, review. We love reading your reviews and it actually helps us as we prepare for messages to come. And make sure to turn on your push notifications so that you can know whenever episodes come out, as we have new episodes every single Wednesday. Guys, I love y'all and I hope you enjoy the show. Incredible people, I love you so much and I'm so thankful that you've tuned into the Have You Heard podcast. My name is Emma Mae McDaniel and I just absolutely adore your life. Y'all are in for a really sweet treat today as we have Cindy Beall on, talking about the value that comes from taking steps to protect your marriage. What does forgiveness look like? What does it look like to move forward and rebuilding trust whenever trust has been broken? It's going to be some solid, sweet conversation. So friends, faith comes by hearing. Grab your headphones and let's get into the word. Cindy Beall, you lovely human. Guys, I've just met her and I'm already she's one of those people that's just easy to talk to, if you know what I mean. So I'm just thankful that you're on. Welcome.
Well, thanks so much. You are just a delight to start this day with. So I'm excited.
Wow. Well, thank you. I love kicking off a podcast, just getting to hear about you. And so in any way that you'd like to share, tell us a little bit about who you are, a little bit about your story, and why you ended up writing a book about healing a broken marriage and about trust being broken. That's kind of deep, Cindy.
A little bit deep, yeah, for sure. So again, as you said, my name is Cindy Beall, and I live in Oklahoma. My husband and I have been married almost 29 years, and we have 3 sons. We have a daughter-in-law, and we have a granddaughter, and she is the joy of our life. I can't even tell you how much we adore that little girl, and so we're just having a lot of fun with her. My husband and I have been on staff at Life Church for a couple of decades, just shy of a couple of decades, and under the leadership of Craig and Amy Groeschel. And so we have just loved being here. I have always been in a supportive role of my husband, where he's been the pastor. And but then just in January, I was hired on to be a part of our YouVersion team, the Bible app that you guys may be aware of. So
I told Josh, I was like, YouVersion.
Yeah, it's pretty fun. We have a great team that's a part of the Life Church team. So I'm the spiritual support leader. We provide prayer and resources and guidance to people in our YouVersion community around the world. So I get to help build a volunteer team that literally has people on every continent except Antarctica. Still working on that one. But
Wow.
so it's super fun. So when I said it, we've been here for 2 decades. So it was the fall of 2001 when we actually came to Life Church, where my husband was kind of interviewing, auditioning, because he was a worship pastor. So we started in January of 2002. And the reason I wrote the book is because the story I'm about to tell you is pretty intense, but 6 weeks on the job, he came home one morning and said, "Babe, we need to talk." Nobody really wants to hear those words, no matter what relationship you're a part of. But he began to tell me that he'd been unfaithful to me many times, many different places, many different women. I'd come to find out that it was all stemming from pornography addiction. So it wasn't an office romance. It wasn't an inappropriate relationship. It was from this sin that just began to kind of spiral, if you will. And then eventually one day he acted out. And so he was living in his own prison during that time. We were not in Oklahoma at the time, but I knew something was wrong in our marriage. I just didn't know what it was. Something was off, but I couldn't figure it out.
Yeah.
And so that was our story. And, there's so much that you and I think we'll dive into, but I just want to say that for me, I had to figure out, was I going to stay or was I going to go? Our oldest son was he was about 3 when all of this happened, and he's 22 now. So basically, I sought God. asked him to give me some guidance. I said, I need to know if I'm supposed to stay with a man that I probably will never trust again. That was kind of my mindset.
Wow.
So yeah, so
Wow.
that's our story in a nutshell. And obviously we've been married almost 29 years, so I stayed and wrote the book. And actually, we've been healing and helping people along the way for the better part of 2 decades.
Cindy, that is so heavy, and I can't even imagine being not only in his shoes. I bet the I don't even know the energy it probably took just to get those words out and share that with you, and how long he's probably been thinking about how to deliver such news. And then in your shoes of how do you respond to that?
Yeah, yeah, and that was it. Like, looking back now, obviously we've healed so much, and I think we've healed as much as we can, but God continues to heal us as we share our story. But as you're hearing all that stuff that I just shared, one of the harder parts for me was finding out that one of the women was pregnant, and he was pretty sure he was the father. And so when I said I have 3 sons, the middle one, I always claimed that I get an extra son, but I didn't have to get extra stretch marks with him. And I know
Oh,
that some people
wow.
think, oh, that's kind of weird to say, but again, he's 19. So we have healed so much, and he is a true joy to me in more ways than you can even imagine. He's my son, and God has even done a redemptive work in all of that, my relationship with his family as well. So, or all of us, we're really close, and we've trusted God, and it's been hard and it's been messy, but God has done a work there as well. So
Wow. I feel like the words that just come are wow and oh my goodness, hearing that. I think something so powerful is not only that y'all are in the healthy, strong, just restored position that you're in as a couple and as a family, but also that you wrote a book, Healing Your Marriage When Trust is Broken. And having written a book, I know that like you don't just do that in a day. Like that not only
right,
takes time and is a thorough process, but also you couldn't have written it at the level at which you have without having like gone through the process of believing what you were writing. And like you
for
had to be
sure.
ministered before in order for you to like be able to in a healthy way minister to other people in the way that you have through this book. So how did it's so incredible hearing about just where you're at now, but what did those 19, 20 years look like, and how did it turn into a book? Y'all, thank you so much for tuning in. I just wanted to take this hot second and tell y'all about a paid sponsorship that I'm getting to do with Faithful Counseling, because life is hard and we weren't made to go about it alone. And Faithful Counseling is an online, worldwide available counseling service that is convenient and accessible no matter where you are globally. They allow counseling service to be available to you via video chat, instant messaging, or phone calls. And these are not just any counselors. These are licensed professional counselors with over 3,000 hours in their respective state. And so, guys, this is legit. And you can have 10% off of your first month's worth of counseling sessions by using my link, faithfulcounseling.com/MMA/. And the link is also provided below. That's faithfulcounseling.com/MMA/. I love y'all and I believe in you. Now let's get back to the show.
Yeah. So when we first, after his confession, and he resigned from our church, and we kind of began this journey with God and with the right people in our lives, helping us and healing. And what's interesting is God told me right away, like, a lot of people say that phrase, God told me, but sometimes I think there are times where we can really be confident. And
Yeah.
so for me, there's probably like 5, 10 times in my life where I'm like, I'm pretty confident God's telling me to do this. And one of those things was writing this book. And what's funny, this is kind of a backstory, just kind of comical. I did not pass the writing requirements when I was a freshman in high school for my state where I lived. I grew up in Texas. So like my little testing piece of paper says did not meet minimum writing quality or requirements. And so I
Cindy,
think that's so funny that God does that. He uses me. And so
I
what's
love
super
that.
awesome is that I just kind of began to write. I was writing a little bit before then, but not like write a book, writing,
Hmm.
because that's a whole nother level, as you well know. And so I began to just write. And honestly, I thought I would get the book published before it first did. So let me just tell your listeners that my book, Healing Your Marriage When Trust is Broken, was first released in 2011.
That's
This
right.
year, for the 10-year anniversary, my publisher, we're re-releasing it, new cover, and it will have the same book, but it will have added content at the end of each chapter and then a final new chapter. So it's still
Wow.
essence the same book, just with kind of a makeover, if you will.
Hmm.
And so when it published in 2011, I didn't think it would take that long. So it was like we were 9 years into our journey. But what we found was that all those years, we needed those years. We needed to be in the crock pot cooking, if you will. We needed God to be doing that work in us, because if I had written the book in 2002 and then it was published in 2004, like, what is that? I mean, am I really able to give you a good picture of our healing journey? And so
Hmm.
9 years in is a much better picture of where we were. So yeah, but you asked the question about what if the last 19 to 20 years look like. And I will tell you, the early years were hard,
Yeah.
obviously, because you're dealing with a broken heart. You're dealing with addiction on my husband's part. You're dealing with freedom or a lack of freedom. You're dealing with betraying people and then building trust, and how do you forgive? So all those ugly, hard things.
Hmm.
And as we begin to process through those, God just continued to heal us. And he told us, like, you're going to help other people. 2 Corinthians 1:3-4 says, praise be to the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, who comforts us in our troubles
Hmm.
so that we can comfort others, right? Like, that is the spiritual pay it forward kind of way. And
Yeah.
so that's what we began doing. And with every couple, with every woman I spoke to, with every time we did something together as a couple, helping others, God healed our hearts. And
Yeah.
so I can literally tell you, I don't know what other healing could come on this side of heaven, but I'm sure God will bring more about. And that's why, I kind of tease a little bit that, people who hear my story for the first time, usually their jaws are on they're like, what? And then I can tell the story. I can stand on the stage. I can do a podcast. I can tell it without any flinching.
Mm.
And then I can be like, hey, you guys want to get some key lime pie? Like, it just is it's just so natural for me because
Yes.
God has done such a huge work. So,
It's so hopeful. It's so hopeful. I've been in Romans 5 a lot lately, and in the first 5 verses, after Paul goes into how, like, therefore we now have peace with God through Jesus because we've been justified, he goes in to say, like we're standing in grace and we're boasting in this joy of the glory of God, and this hope. But then he goes on to say, but not only that, we boast in our affliction. We boast in those difficult things, and that it leads to endurance, and that leads to a strengthened character, and that leads to a hope that will not put you to shame, as the Lord has poured out his love into you through what he's given you in the Holy Spirit. And I just see that in this story. That is not something people would say, oh, I want to boast in that. But as you've leaned into the Lord and trusted him, he's proven his glory through your life in such a powerful way. It just makes me think of that verse that says, let the redeemed of the Lord say so. That's what you're doing right
right.
now, is just you are saying so, that the Lord has done what only he could have done. Wow. And I want you to talk a little bit to those who are listening that may be single, and how, if they were to go read your book, how does this, like, they may hear this, people who are single may be hearing this conversation and think, like, okay, I'm about to turn off because I'm not married, or I don't see myself
Right.
getting married
Right.
anytime soon. How would this encourage them or prepare them for marriage specifically? There's something pretty awesome about having clothes that are both comfy and cute. And Girlfriend Collective makes their clothes in a way that makes you feel your best in them, no matter what you're doing. Whether you're working out, running day-to-day errands, or you're just chilling at the house having a comfy day. And their products are inclusive, being for sizes extra, extra small to 6XL. And they're great for the planet, being 100% recyclable, which I think is pretty spectacular. And for listeners of the show, Girlfriend Collective is providing for first-time customers a 20% off of purchases $100 or more when you go to girlfriend.com/Emma. That's 25% off of purchases $100 or more when you go to girlfriend.com/Emma. That's girlfriend.com/Emma.
Yeah, I think a lot of people who listen, they do hear my story, and they get scared. If I'm honest, they're like, oh,
Yeah.
I don't want that to be my story. Or maybe it's a newly married couple like you and Josh, or even someone who's been married 5 years, 10 years. I think there's that internal, like, oh, that tendency to want to just be like, I can't let this happen. How do I prevent this? And so that's part of it that I definitely want to caution people. Like, my story is not everyone's story. And there's a lot of people who make it through and have healthy, strong, happy, glorious marriages who are faithful to each other. It doesn't mean you won't have hardship. You will. I mean, you're joining two people together.
Yeah.
And you have to learn to die to self in order to make the marriage strong and united. With keeping a bit of your autonomy and being your own person. But it's hard to be married. But what I would say to the single person is use my story as what not to do, for sure. But, think about the things in your life that could lead you down a path. What are you feeding your flesh, or are you living by the Spirit? And you really can't do both. And so a lot of people think, oh, I've got to crucify my flesh. And here's what I would say is, when we feed the Spirit, when we walk by the Spirit and allow things to fill our minds and our hearts and our souls, and we do things that build up the internal part of us, our spirit, our soul, we don't have to worry about crucifying the flesh, because it will starve. It will starve to death when it does not get satiated. And so that's what pause. Sorry. Whoops. Let's go back. So when your flesh is not fed, it will starve. And so that's what I would want to say to the people listening, married too, what is in your life that could lead you down a path? Because my husband did not do this in one day. Yeah. It was a little bit, here's the straight line, and it was a little bit. And before you knew it, it was like totally off the rails. So that's just, what are you feeding yourself with? Are you spending time in God's word? Are you listening to podcasts? Are you encouraging yourself? Are you spending time around people who are like-minded, who are, walking with Jesus? So those are the things I would say. And every day, there's a few things you can do in your marriage. Be intentional and make investments every day, every single day. That's what happens in marriages. That's what happens when they fall apart. People stop being intentional and people stop making investments.
That's so true. That's so good. Yep. It makes me think of a time whenever me, my mom, my dad, and my brother, we went on this trip. We did like this 2-week-long trip where we did Bryce Canyon, Grand Canyon. Like we had a fun hiking time. And so we were walking tons of miles, like all throughout those 2 weeks. And we would wear these sandals. And you sometimes get these pebbles stuck in your sandals. And my mom said this, and this was 5 years ago, never forgotten it. My mom said, this is really how we should treat sin. Whenever just one little pebble would get stuck between our foot and our sandal, it was so uncomfortable. Like, you had to say, hold up, folks, like, I got to get this out of my shoe, because it just is. It's really messing with my vibe as I walk. But what if we were to treat sin in that way, that even the littlest, like, toxic thought pattern, or just like I could list off things, but they seem small. It seems like, oh, that's no big deal. Like, it's okay. It's not really going to have that great of an impact. And like you said, it's just gradual. And it
Yeah.
slowly steals and kills and destroys your life and your joy and your peace. And just to treat it as a pebble, like that's just very, very encouraging to the single people
Yeah.
of, okay, what does my life look like now? Because I can't expect myself to get
Yeah.
married and assume that all these bad habits are just going to stop because I'm married now.
For sure, absolutely. And just making sure that, if you're single and you're praying for that person to come along, and
Mhm.
you want to have that life to share, or someone to share your life with, look for the person who's doing the same things. Like if
That's good.
you're growing in your faith and you're feeding your spirit, but then you come along someone who is very attractive and they are not doing the same things, and so you think you can come in and kind of play a Jesus to them or be their own Holy Spirit. I just want to caution people with that, because that doesn't usually turn out too well. You want someone who's right next to you running the race. Some days you're ahead of that person, other days they're ahead of you. It's just that the nature of marriage. We build each other up, we lead each other, we help each other. That's my biggest encouragement to the single people.
That's good encouragement, friend. Can you share with us just some key ways to protect a marriage? Like just on a practical day-to-day basis, what does it look like to protect your marriage?
I think there's a lot of things that Chris and I do. The first thing is we are completely honest with each other.
Mm.
And honestly, we're probably brutally honest. We say the things that, you ask the question, honey, do I look good in this? And if I ask that question, I have to be prepared for him to say, maybe you should try a different outfit. And some women are like, I can't believe she would say that. But look, what we've been through,
Mm.
every honesty is so vital to us. And so I want to make sure that I'm speaking honestly with him, and he's doing the same with me. So honesty is very key. Like I already said, intentionality,
I
investment,
love that.
those things every day. Because what happens with couples is they say, oh, I've fallen out of love with her. Well, that's because you stopped investing. That's because you started looking elsewhere, or there's someone at work who maybe, said the right things to you. Building each other up, encouraging each other, learning each other's love language, making sure you're speaking their language. So I speak, if I speak French and my husband speaks Japanese, I have to learn how to speak Japanese. He has to learn how to speak French. We have to learn each other's language so that we can meet each other's needs and make the investment there. I think another way to protect your marriage is, like I mentioned, just what are you doing personally to become the best Christ following version of yourself.
Yes.
And hopefully your significant other or soon to be spouse, maybe, well, or I guess we're talking to married couples. So hopefully your spouse is doing the same. And if they are not, this is when you drop to your knees and you go to the Father on their behalf. So when I said earlier that I knew something was wrong in my marriage it was about a 2.5 year period, I couldn't, how do you address something? How do you go to your husband and go, I just know something's wrong? Because he just was like, he would have probably, back then, he would have turned it around on me and said, you just need to get over yourself. You're feeling too much or whatever. But so what I did is I just was on my knees. And so when my world came crashing down, when my world fell apart, there was only one I knew to go to, and it was my Heavenly Father. And that's because I had been going to him for 2.5 years. I was virtually alone during that time, because I had my husband and the senior pastor were leading together at the church where we were. So how do you come and, who do you tell? So those are the things I would say to protect your marriage, invest, be intentional, love Jesus, and just honor one another.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's plenty of other things I could say.
Yeah, no, that's so foundational though. That's so encouraging and practical, because even like that kind of goes back to speaking to the single person preparing for their heart for marriage. Like, yeah,
For sure.
am I committing myself to being just someone of prayer? Am I someone who honors my friends and seeks to serve people and seeks to intentionally invest into the lives of others? That's just good. Okay, this is a tough subject, but I think it's such a freeing thing whenever we walk in it according to what the word of the Lord says. And that is the topic of forgiveness. And so I want to hear you just talk about, what does that process of moving forward look like? And talk to us about what you have learned about forgiveness. And what do you do whenever you know God says to forgive as you have been forgiven, but whenever your feelings aren't meeting your desire to obey that command? Y'all, thank you so much for tuning in. I just wanted to take this hot second and tell y'all about a paid sponsorship that I'm getting to do with Faithful Counseling, because life is hard and we weren't made to go about it alone. And Faithful Counseling is an online, worldwide available counseling service that is convenient and accessible no matter where you are globally. They allow counseling service to be available to you via video chat, instant messaging, or phone calls. And these are not just any counselors. These are licensed professional counselors with over 3,000 hours in their respective state. And so, guys, this is legit. And you can have 10% off of your first month's worth of counseling sessions by using my link, faithfulcounseling.com/MMA/. And the link is also provided below. That's faithfulcounseling.com/MMA/. I love y'all and I believe in you. Now let's get back to the show.
Oh, that is so the truth about forgiveness. We know we should forgive, and our feelings just do not play well. They do not do the right thing. So for me, and this is probably odd, maybe for some listeners to hear, but it was actually easier for me to forgive Chris than many would think. The part that tripped me up was, how do I trust him again? Does that make sense?
That makes so much sense.
Yeah, but let's talk about forgiveness. For me, I take God's word very seriously, and I recognize that, I have been forgiven of so much from my Heavenly Father, and how in the world, or what makes me think I have the right to withhold forgiveness from someone else? And here's what happens is, as humans, we put sin in categories, right? We say, oh, that's just a little sin. Oh, that's a big sin. Here's the thing. Consequences on earth, totally accurate. The little sins, the gossip, the speeding down the road without getting caught, there are things that may not have a big consequence. Murder, fraud, those things, bigger consequences. But what happens in God's sight is, like, he doesn't look at my gossip that let's say I'm participating in gossip every day, and he doesn't go, oh, you know what? That's okay. Cindy's fine. She's not committing adultery. At least she's not murdering someone. God, all of it falls short of his glory, like we learn in Romans 3:23. And so that's what I would say about just changing your mindset, because, and this might step on some toes, but sometimes if we think that it's very arrogant for us to think that our sin is okay and someone else's isn't.
I'm so glad you said that, because that's so true.
Yeah, and it is. And we tend to, this is what we do. We look at someone else and we judge them by their actions. And then we look at ourselves and we judge ourselves by our intentions. So I look at that person over there, I cannot believe that person did that, or they stole, they didn't pay their taxes, or whatever it was. And then I look at me and I'm like, well, I didn't really mean to, And so we give ourselves the benefit of the doubt, but we would never give someone else the benefit of the doubt. Traffic is the perfect example. Let me explain. We can be so mean on the road when someone needs to merge over, maybe because they didn't realize their lane was ending, right? But then when we need to merge over, we're like, well, I didn't mean to, right? So that's what I'm talking about, this whole judging people by their actions, but ourselves by our intentions. And I think that is key to forgiveness. And so, where I am now with my husband is, so, back in the early days of marriage, I mean, we did our fair share of trying to wound each other. It's pretty common. We feel attacked. We want to wound. We want to blame. Now, when he says something that I might take an offense to or might get my feelings hurt, I can honestly tell you that I do not think for 1 second that my husband wants to hurt me. I believe his
Mm.
intentions are pure, although sometimes his actions don't line up. But I don't think for a minute he's like, I'm going to see what I can say to wound my wife's heart. And so I give him the benefit of the doubt. And so
Yeah.
when things do happen and he says something, I might say, hey, I know you didn't mean to hurt me, but when you said this, it stung. I just wanted to share that with you because I don't want there to be any rift between the two of us. So
Mm.
that's kind of where we've been on our journey of forgiveness. And so I don't know, um, there's a lot of people who struggle with forgiving because they've been wounded deeply. And I definitely want to be sensitive to people who have been molested, sexually assaulted, betrayed in these ways that we can't even imagine.
Yeah.
Um, but I would just say, seek out that forgiveness of them, so that you can be free.
Hmm.
But remember, just because we forgive someone doesn't mean we have to be reconciled into a relationship with them again. If it's someone, some kind of perpetrator or something like that. So, or even, I could have walked away from my marriage, but I still would have needed to forgive my husband so
Hmm.
that I could live free and honor Jesus.
Yes. Yes. Cindy, this is so encouraging, and I really think that this will be a blessing to people, like not only in marriages but also just in your friendships or in relationships with your family. Like, what does it look like to move forward in forgiveness, knowing that knowing that healing from that is a process, but that I actually can and I'm called. I God commands that we forgive. It makes me think of this parable. I believe it's in Matthew, where this man, he has like this really really big debt to pay back to the king, and the king, he like brings him in and he's like, hey, like, until you pay back this debt, this is what's going to have to happen to you. And the man is just, this is very much of an Emma paraphrase, but
Right.
the man is like please be merciful to your servant. And like, I just was really like begging his case, and the king is so gracious and extends like such mercy to him and says, don't worry about it, your debt is taken care of. You are forgiven for not paying it. And then, very short time after, the man who had just been forgiven, his debt had been taken care of, he has someone who has yet to pay him. And so somebody else is indebted to him. But he goes, and there is no ounce of grace, no ounce of mercy that he shows to this man. And he ends up getting, like, the king's like, dude, did you not just have any gratitude that not only you received, but you were able to extend to those who were indebted to you as well? And he ends up like in a really bad predicament because of
Right.
how he responded. But I think that that's just so encouraging to see that, just that picture of, because I have been forgiven by God, I now am compelled by the love of Christ to go and forgive other people, even whenever it may not make sense to my human understanding, but it doesn't make sense in my own human understanding for God to forgive me either. So, like, always having that humble heart posture and awareness of God's mercy and grace extended to you, it never fails to just create such a perspective whenever you see other people who wound you or hurt you, because you're able to just refer back to the Lord. It's so
Yeah.
helpful. I love that. Thank you for speaking on that, because that isn't something that's easy to talk about, much more so walk through. So thank you. And I also, I want to ask you, what is your hope for those who pick up this book and read it? What is your heart for the people who walk through what you've written?
You know, it's been my heart for all these years, honestly, is that people will recognize that, yes, betrayal, infidelity, in marriage, I do believe that scripture supports you can walk away from your marriage. I know that there are people who don't, and that's okay. I'm not here for a theological debate, but just for me, I do believe that that is something that is spoken to. But I also believe that when two people are willing to do whatever it takes, it is an opportunity for forgiveness and restoration. Um, and that's what I want people to see. I want people to hear that they're not alone. I'm going to speak to the wives who might be listening or reading. I want them to understand that just because their spouse acted out on them doesn't mean they're not attractive, doesn't mean they're not lovely, doesn't mean they're not enough. Those are all things I felt. And I can't really speak to what a husband would feel if a wife is unfaithful, because I'm not a man, but I would just say you are enough. I do know that men, that is their identity to want to feel like, are they respected? Are they enough? Are they, so I want people to feel like there's hope. I mean, that's at the end of the day, there's hope that your marriage can be what my book talks about is better than new. That is behind it. I want people to see that just because you have experienced a marriage threatening blow does not mean that there's not hope for you. So and people who are reading my book who have not been through any kind of marriage betrayal, I want them to fight and stay together and work on things so that they don't find themselves in this kind of situation. So yeah.
That's very encouraging. And you noted earlier about how, in regard to forgiveness, because you didn't just look at his action and your intention, so you talked about how that went about in your own heart so beautifully. But I want you to talk about what rebuilding trust looked like, because you acknowledged that was the harder aspect for you in your journey. What does that look like? Because I know sometimes just relationships with my girlfriends can be a tough one.
Yes.
Sometimes your relationship with your parents can be a tough one. Like, there are just sometimes little things that can chip away at trust being established in a relationship. And so on this scale within your marriage, how did that practically get rebuilt?
Yeah. So I remember when I was trying to decide if I was going to stay married, and I just was praying, God, I need to hear from you. God, what do I do? God, how do I stay married? God, all these questions. And I just felt that God was saying, do you trust me? And I'm like, well, of course I trust you. I'm having this dialogue in my head, and I'm like, yes, I trust you. And I kept thinking, oh, is this it? Is this what God is saying? That all I have to do is trust him? I don't have to trust my husband right now. And so I'm like, ooh, I don't know how I want to answer this, God. So, I mean, it's just kind of this silly dialogue with God. And he's probably like, okay, Cindy, you've trusted me. Let's keep trusting me. So really what it came down to was God saying, do you trust me? And when I finally said, yeah, I do trust you. And I almost felt like he was like, I'll take it from here. Now, it didn't mean I didn't have to do work, and I didn't have to trust him, and I didn't have to do hard things, but like just saying, okay, God, you're the only one who's never let me down. Like, when I think of all the people in my life who are trustworthy to me, that I can stand on what they're going to do or say, like, they're still imperfect people. They're still humans. And as humans, we have this problem. It's called our humanity, and it causes us to fall and say things we shouldn't say and do things we shouldn't do, even if it's not like on a grand scale. We still, let our friend down. We still let our brother down, and we still disappoint our parents. Now, that could be an expectation thing, and that's a whole different story. But for me, trusting was trusting God first. Proverbs 3:5-6 says, trust in the Lord with all your heart. It doesn't say trust in your mother or your brother, your husband, your wife, or your pastor. It says trust in the Lord with all your heart. And what that has allowed me to do is trusting in God has allowed my trust in my husband to build, because when my husband is walking in the Spirit, when he is When I see fruit in his life, the fruit of the Spirit, love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, when I see that in his life, it's easy for me to trust him. When I see him walking by the flesh, that's when I'm like, okay, I get a little nervous or something. But for the most part, it's knowing that I do not have to trust my husband 100% or any other human 100%, but only God. It has allowed me to show them grace when they do mess up. Now, I really hope and pray Chris never messes up like this again. And to this day, he has not, praise God. But I also just recognize he's still a human. He's still a human being. So trust is an interesting thing because we as humans want that person on earth that we can say, without a doubt, I trust you. And what we're essentially saying to that person is, I know you'll never let me down. And so for me, it freed me to be okay when Chris would, say something to hurt my feelings, or disappoint me by not reading my mind like we women want our husbands to do. So I hope that kind of helps, but it was definitely a process. And I can tell you now that I really do trust him, but I trust his intentions. Could his actions still fail me from time to time? Sure. But I trust my husband's heart. He does not want to hurt me. And that is what I know for sure. And then I just trust God with all the rest,
Y'all, thank you so much for tuning in. I just wanted to take this hot second and tell y'all about a paid sponsorship that I'm getting to do with Faithful Counseling, because life is hard and we weren't made to go about it alone. And Faithful Counseling is an online, worldwide available counseling service that is convenient and accessible no matter where you are globally. They allow counseling service to be available to you via video chat, instant messaging, or phone calls. And these are not just any counselors. These are licensed professional counselors with over 3,000 hours in their respective state. And so, guys, this is legit. And you can have 10% off of your first month's worth of counseling sessions by using my link, faithfulcounseling.com/MMA/. And the link is also provided below. That's faithfulcounseling.com/MMA/. I love y'all and I believe in you. Now let's get back to the show. I love this theme throughout our conversation in the midst of talking about forgiveness and talking about rebuilding trust and talking about preparing for stepping into a marriage relationship. All of it is like, where are you at with the Lord? Where are you at with the Lord? Yeah. Who is the Lord? What has he done for you? Who does he say you are? That's so rich and good whenever we have an undivided heart that fears his name. We're relying on his truth, as you brought up, that we're trusting in him with all of our heart, not leaning on our own understanding, going back to him and letting his word and his spirit determine what next step we take and how we respond to this next person and how we view the situation that we're in. It's a game changer. And I just really admire and love how you continue to refer back to. And I truly believe that that's a testament to the sweet, strong place that you're in with your husband. It makes me think, I think it's in Psalm 124, and it says, if it had not been for the Lord, let Israel say, if it had not been for the Lord, then our enemies would have crushed us. And it goes into all of these terrible things that would have happened to the Israelites. And that's what I hear in your story and that's what I hear in every believer's story, is if it had not been for the Lord, I would not be where I'm at. So just thank you for continuing, not only in our conversation, but just through your life and through your marriage. Thank you for continuing to go back to the Lord. It's beautiful.
Yeah. I mean, I think about that. I love that you shared that verse. So I'm going to look it up and study that. But I think about Peter. I don't remember the whole context of the story, but Jesus basically, he's talking about other people who have left him, and he looks at his followers, his disciples, and he was like, are you going to leave too? I think that was, I'm paraphrasing again here, and then and Peter's like, well, where else would we go? Like, we have, like,
Yeah.
you're the number one option. And so I think that's kind of where I am. Like, what other option do I have?
Mm-hmm.
People typically do one of two things when hard things happen in their lives. They run from God and they run to him. And what's sad is they think that when they run to God, that they're somehow, they have to be okay with what happened to them. And that's just not true. You don't have to be okay with what I wasn't okay with what happened. I asked God a lot of questions. I asked questions of God without questioning him, if that makes sense. Like, I just
Oh,
said, I
I
don't.
love that you just said that.
I mean, that's just where I was. I was like, I don't understand, but I trust you. So
Yeah, that's good.
I asked him questions, but I still trusted in his sovereignty. I trusted in his love for me. I hope that makes sense there.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, at the end of the day, when my life ends on this earth, there's only one thing that really matters, and it's, am I still walking with Jesus?
Mm-hmm.
And I want that to be my legacy beyond being an amazing wife, great mother, wonderful grandma. I mean, wonderful pastor. I mean, all those things, nothing matters to me but to finish the race that has been set before me.
Mm.
And so that's what I strive to do every day. And I don't always succeed, but I'm still going, still striving.
Wow. Well, out of your heart, the mouth speaks, and it's evident that that is what you're about, because your words are just that's what your words are filled with. Is it's about him, and so I see it. I have just one more question for you regarding people who may be walking through a difficult time in their marriage, regarding people who may just want to take action steps as to how they can be proactive and protect their marriage. What resources would you share so that they can go and invest in, of course, including healing your marriage when trust is broken?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, the biggest thing is, there's so many ways that you can invest in your marriage. You can invest even just starting at home.
Mm.
There are so many things you can watch online. You can do little marriage courses that help you and your spouse. You can, obviously, counseling is key, but I do know that in this day and age where we are, counselors are really backed up. It's really hard to get in to see them because there's so much crisis in our world. So find a couple that you respect their marriage. Ask if you can spend time with them.
I
And
love
here's
that.
the thing: you've got to be vulnerable about where your marriage is. Like, what is the condition of your marriage?
Yeah.
And if your spouse says it's fine, but you think it's not, you've both got to listen to each other. You come to your marriage with a particular lens and how you see things. So respect each other's lens, even if you don't agree with it. It's just where we are as couples. So, I mean, counseling, mentoring, reading books, listening to books, going to some kind of marriage getaway. Their focus on the family does these marriage intensives, they
Mm-hmm.
call them. You can go to their website and find it, but like, they're on intimacy, on communication, on so many different topics. And you go somewhere, and if it can be pricey, but what are you willing to invest in your marriage is what I
Yeah.
would say. So there's a lot of things, but again, I will always go back to intentionality and investment. So when your
Hear that,
marriage is
folks?
not doing well, the two I's, just remember: intentionality and investment. Are you being intentional? Are you willing to invest in? Are you investing? You guys, investing is so easy. Like, it's just me doing one nice thing for Chris a day. It's me sending him one sweet text a day. It's me letting him know I respect him. I'm thankful for him. I appreciate him working hard for our family and making sure the car is running and the air conditioner unit is working well. So
Mm.
it's just investing and being intentional. Those are two key components in a successful marriage.
Wow, investment and intentionality. That's like a life principle. That can really do you good in any relationship. That's awesome. So I just love you. I would love if you would share with people where they can find out more about you, where they can just stay in touch with you, where they can buy your book, all of that good stuff.
Yeah. So obviously I have a website, cindybeall.com. It's not really that fancy. It's just kind of a landing page. But obviously, social media, my handle on Instagram, that's mostly where I am, is Cindy Beall. And I would just say Amazon is probably the easiest place. I do know that I think the publisher is getting in the process of working the links when you search, because it still goes to my old book right now. So
Noted.
just make sure you're looking for it's a lighter kind of colored cover instead of a red and blue one. So I know that's kind of detailed, but yeah, that's
that
probably
helps.
the best thing to do. So yeah.
Thank you. Well, incredible. Y'all be sure, and whether it's you buying Healing Your Marriage When Trust is Broken, or someone is currently on your heart or on your mind, and you can see it as a great idea to give it to somebody. And y'all, I just really, really appreciate you tuning in today. If you are watching on YouTube, be sure and give a thumbs up. Subscribe if you haven't. Comment down below something you learned, a takeaway, and what else you would like to see in the future that's talked about, who you would like to have on being interviewed. And if you are listening via Apple or Spotify, be sure and download, rate, review, share it with all of your people, and know that I love you. Go get your merch for the fall collection. You are loved. It is on the MMA collection Instagram page. Also, Have You Heard podcast Instagram page is the official podcast Instagram, where you can get all of the updates and you can stay in tune with just my day-to-day life and all of those sweet things on my Instagram page, 1 Corinthians 13_love. I'm so thankful for you. I'm so excited about what the Lord has in store for you today, and I will talk to y'all next week. Bye, guys.